All right. We are live. We are streaming. We are moving along. I will say a quick prayer and we'll get started here. I don't know if y'all know Richard or not, but he's a longtime member of the church that moved away and moved back and missed us. And so that's Richard Penn. So, a golfer. Yep, absolutely. Bad slide. Three knuckles. Three knuckles and get that V up the right shoulder. There you go.
Thank you.
Slice will go away.
Check's in the mail.
Bill's in the mail. All right. Father, thank you for another week. Thank you for another class, Father. Thanks for keeping everybody safe that was traveling. Marie comes back tomorrow. Keep her safe as well. Well, she's out in Indiana visiting old friends and family, and get her back safely, please. Thanks for Pastor Billy's sermon this morning. That was a good one. Always about prayer is always good, Father. So, and Billy's the expert in prayer. So thanks for that. And Father, be with your people in Israel. Continue to keep a hedge around them, Father. Protect them from the evil they're facing, they're looking at. Peace and comfort for all of those people that have lost family members, Father. Give them, well, peace and comfort and understanding. And again, a speedy end to the war going on over there, Lord. Asking for unity to continue in the church while we search for this new pastor, for the new person that you've already picked out, Father. So we just need to discover who it is. So help us with that. Help the committee that once it's formed do that as well. And then be with me this morning, Father. Continue to give me wisdom. Continue to give me your words that I may pass it on to the people that are listening online and that are gathered here. So, and thank you for this class and bringing these people with their ears to hear, Father. These things I lift up to you. And, well, wait, before I end this, help me with pronunciation this morning, Father, and enunciation. I've been having some issues getting the words out of my mouth, so help me with that, please, as well. So, Father, these things I lift up to you in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen. All right.
Can I mention one thing?
Yes.
Relating this to what Billy preached about this morning. There is what I think is probably the best sermon I've ever heard on prayer by Pastor Jim Cymbala. Some of you may know who he is. He's the pastor of the Brooklyn Tabernacle in New York City. He preached a sermon, and I've been in a church that played the video. He preached a sermon on prayer, and it was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. You could hear a pin drop. People were not sleeping. They were so focused on what was being said. It's an excellent video. If anybody wants to see it, it's on YouTube. You just have to search for it. It's Pastor Jim Cymbala, Cymbala. It's excellent. If you're interested in prayer at all, and Billy has seen that video, by the way, but it is excellent. I just might recommend that.
All right, thank you. All right, so in case I haven't worn you all out yet on Daniel 2, we're going to do a quick review, and I promise it's going to be quick because I know we spent a lot of time here. So,
We've been reviewing it for 4 weeks.
well, there's a lot to review. So, all right, Age of the Gentiles is what we've been looking at, and will we finish that up today? Almost. started with the Babylonians. There's the empires that goes down. We're now in the fourth kingdom, which is where we are and what we're living in. It starts with Rome as shown, and then it morphs into the 10 toes. Last week I brought up the couple of conspiracy theories that those toes represent NATO. People say they represent NATO. People say they represent the European Union. People say they United Nations. Some say it's America. Some say it's the Catholic Church. But the name we chose was the Revived Roman Empire because it's easy. It's easy for me to remember. And just to remind you, that kingdom, Rome, as Rome was conquering, the monarchies kind of took over, and it turned in the name change to the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire didn't officially end until 1806, and that was on paper. So one of the theories is that there's still a bloodline, there's still DNA out there from some of the early Roman emperors, and that's how that's going to happen. So anyway, we don't know. We'll find out as we go along. As we get into Daniel 7 here today, the purpose of Daniel 7 is to give us a few more details on this fourth kingdom and how it's going to come to an end. So starting with Daniel 7, verse 2, Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. And I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was also given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. And it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. So again, we spent a lot of time in 2. We can kind of get through this somewhat quickly. We know from that this vision shows us, again, it's the age of the Gentiles, but this time it shows us the character, if you will, of each age. The first 3 of these animals we know about, even though they're kind of different. They have modifications on them. There's a explanation of the 4 animals, and the first one is the lion. And the lion is the head of gold in our statue. And remember, that represents Babylon. And how do we know that? Well, one of the reasons is that the ancient symbol of Babylon was the lion. And these are from ruins of Babylon that archaeologists have dug up. The statue on your right was dug up in the early 1900s, and they're not sure that came from Nebuchadnezzar's time or a little later, but the one on the left with the Griffith, as they're called, was part of the Babylonian ruins. It was on a gate to the city, and of course it's been restored here, but so that ties it together very nicely. And I got a couple of wormholes to go down here today. This is one of them. This is just for the fun of it. Here's a statue that was erected in front of the United Nations. It obviously it says it's controversial. This is I'll just read this real quick. It's an article from the Christian Post. It's a newspaper, online newspaper, from January 5th, 2022, and the reporter is Leonardo Blair. Weeks after it was first displayed on the Visitors Plaza outside the United Nations headquarters in November, the controversial Guardian for International Peace and Security sculpture, many Christians likened to a biblical end-time speech. It's now gone. Initial reports to the Christian Post suggested that the sculpture was removed from the Visitors Plaza in late December due to complaints from the public. Stephanie Dujarric, spokesperson for the Secretary General, explained, however, that the display was temporary and was removed as scheduled. The statue you refer to was a temporary exhibit organized by the Permanent Mission of Mexico to the United Nations. It was taken down as scheduled and anticipated on the 20th of December, Dujarric said in a statement to the Christian Post on Monday. And obviously, conservative Christian frenzy over the artwork began brewing after the UN tweeted an image prompting references to certain scriptures in the Bible, including Daniel 7, which highlights the vision of beasts representing governments, one of which is depicted with a body like a lion and wings like an eagle. And they also referred to Revelation 13:2, where the beast is given power and authority by Satan. So, it also refers back to 1 Thessalonians 5:3, which speaks of the end times, and that verse is, there is peace and security only to experience unexpected ruin. So, just a little conspiracy there. That was, so it was there, and it was there for a very short time. It was there for like 2 months before they took it. So, back to what's really important here. We'll start with the lion. Wings of an eagle, wings plucked, lifted up from earth, man's heart given. This is Nebuchadnezzar. It's his character, and we'll get back to that a little later. Second, we go to the bear, and that is the Medo-Persians. And how do we know that? Well, if you remember, that kingdom was the Medes and the Persian joining together and uniting. You can see, and it says he's raised up on its side, and that's because the Persian Empire was much larger than the Medes. They were much more dominant, and that represents the lopsidedness of the bear. And that kingdom also reached the height of its power when it conquered Lydia, Babylonia, and Egypt. And all three were very large kingdoms, and those kingdoms, it's thought, are the three ribs in the bear's mouth. The third animal, the third kingdom, the Greek Empire, and if you remember, I said it moved swiftly, it was lightning fast, like a leopard. Well, if you remember, it almost completed its expansion in 4 years. So not only was it as fast as a leopard, it was as fast as a leopard that had wings on it. So it was quick. I mean, that was what he was known for. Alexander, it was the lightning quickness of his army. So, so there we have 3 animals. Oh, the 4 heads. I'm sorry, I skipped the 4 heads. The 4 heads were when Alexander died. He split his kingdom with his 4 generals. So that's what the 4 heads represent. And then the 4th beast He's a nasty one. These three we know. I mean, we know what a leopard looks like. We know, Daniel knew obviously he knew what a lion looked like, right? So he knew what a bear looked like, and he knew what the leopard looked like. But he didn't give words to this fourth beast. He had no idea. This was a new one on him. Chapter 7, verse 7 and 8. After this, I kept looking in the night visions. By now, I'd be under the bed, right? Seeing these guys. But here's Daniel. He keeps looking. So after this, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. And while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boast. So I kind of want to go here for just a minute. You can skip we're not going to look at Daniel 8, so you can skip the goat and the ram at the bottom. But this is a timeline. You can see the time of the Gentiles at the top. The church age is in the gray there at the top. You all see that? Okay. It starts with the cross, and that's Jesus' crucifixion. It's in the church age is in the fourth age. That's where we are. The lion at the bottom, the lion goes to the head, the bear to the silver, the leopard to the bronze, as we all talked about. Now we're in the Roman Empire, and then it's the revived Roman Empire. The stone comes. This is a pretty simple timeline to be looking at. If you would all like a copy of this, I'll bring some next week. It's good to have, and it's quick, and it tells us everything we need to know, really. The next timeline gets a little more complicated, but let's get back to the fourth beast. Any questions on this? Nothing? Okay. There's the fourth beast. Cute little guy. Uh-oh.
Does the crown has any?
The what?
The crown holds
10 horns, right?
10 horns.
Yep. Okay. This is the beast that goes to the fourth. Well, this is my rendition. This is the rendition I stole off of the internet of the beast that goes with the Roman Empire. As I said, the first 3 animals are all animals that we've seen before. Daniel has seen them before. He knew what they meant. But this one, he had no idea what this guy looked like. So he was at a loss for words. So he just called it a beast. And he says it's dreadful and terrifying. And like the statue, this fourth beast crushes and breaks apart the other 3 kingdoms as well. So with the 10 horns, and what do you think those represent?
European common market.
Not the common market.
No, the Europe, yeah.
Um,
The 10.
I'm going to keep it simpler than that for right. I'll just give you a quick little hint. We'll talk about those darn 10 toes later. So 10 toes, 10 horns. We'll get that. So now he goes on to say that Daniel keeps looking at this guy, and then there's going to be an 11th horn that emerges out of the 10. So there's his 10 horns, and there's the little guy. I I say little guy, but he's pretty impressive there. This 11th horn is humanized. He has the eyes and mouth of a man. And in other verses in Daniel, it talks about how much he does boast. He's a very boastful horn. He touches on it here, but if you go to some of the other verses, he's always running his mouth. Just quick little wormhole again. In the past, 15 years, the top 3 candidates for this horn have been these 3. And there's others out there, but these are the ones that people keep saying are this horn. So, and one of the reasons it's Trump is because of the horn's always running its mouth and boasting. So people are like, yeah, that's Trump, right? But whatever. So, we can be pretty sure, though, as I go on, we can be pretty sure it's none of these 3 guys. So anyway, back to the horn. You can tell by this photo that he's got blood all over his head. So we know it must have been a violent takeover. He ripped them out by the roots. And then he's now the leader. Daniel 7, 9, and 10. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were open. So the end of the age happens with the Ancient of Days is seated on his throne and is in ruling and judgment. So this Ancient of Days, here it's God. Okay, and there can be no doubt about that it's God. It's only found 3 times in Scripture, and it's all here in Daniel. Verses 9 and 10 tell us that God is setting these thrones up and opening books, which we also see in Revelation 20, 11 through 15. Any questions on that? No? Okay. The reason we're sure, the Ancient of Days gets tricky because it means God, and in another place it means Jesus. But we know here it means God because we're told in a couple of verses later that Jesus is coming to join God. So, I think it's Daniel 22. Yeah, it's Daniel 22 that it refers to Jesus. So, going on, we're going to jump to Daniel 7, 20 through 22. And this Daniel's telling us the meaning of the 10 horns. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, uttering great boast, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and their Ancient of Days refers to Jesus. And judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. So again, I told you it's Jesus. And the 10 horns, let's get to these back. We'll go back to the 10 horns and the 10 toes. So we decided that this statue is a timeline, correct? It's a timeline, age of the Gentiles. And we're going to tie the 10 horns to the 10 toes. They're the same things. And we're going to take a closer look in going on in Daniel because Daniel's really, his attention is really focused on this 11th horn right now. So, verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them. And he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High, and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will attend to make alteration in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and a half a times. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, what is it? Sovereignty. And dyslexia. The sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the Highest One. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. So again, fourth kingdom comes along, crushes, breaks all the previous kingdoms. It's going to expand and devour the whole earth. It's going to crush it and eventually unite into a single kingdom under that 11th horn. And this guy, this kingdom gets to be ruled by this guy for a time, and a half a time. And that is a relatively obscure reference to a period of time. But what that does for us is it ties it back into the book of Revelation. This term, the times, speaking of times and half a time, is the only other place in the Bible it's found is in Revelation. And because of Revelation, we know it means 3.5 years. And we'll come back and talk about that later. So verse 25 tells us that, Daniel tells us, the world ruler will gain complete control over the earth for 3.5 years. And when those 3.5 years are over, his authority and dominion are going to be taken away by the saints of the Highest One at his appearing. So again, and as always, we see God in complete control of everything. Okay, he allows things to happen, but he's always in control. And in verse 27, we're told this new kingdom's going to be everlasting. So to summarize a little bit, I changed the word from review to summarize. This tells us we have total confirmation of what we learned in Daniel 2. Age of the Gentiles, 4 kingdoms. 4th is the most important. It ends our age. It brings Christ to us. We can know that we're coming to the end of the age when we first see 10 rulers, right? And then another ruler comes along, the 11th horn. Have we seen that, or are we even close to seeing that right now? and we'll talk about that more later. A question that came to my mind is that, when this horn, how did this little mouthy, boastful horn get control over all the other kingdoms so quickly? It's thought that because it was such a violent uprooting of the three kingdoms he took over, that the other seven were just scared. I mean, he saw what they did, and it's like, okay, you're our guy, we're gonna follow you. So they just jumped on board. So before we know,
He's supposed to represent the Antichrist, right?
yeah, and I just haven't said the word yet, but yeah, that's who he is. So before Christ can come for the second time, we need to go back to just having 10 kingdoms or nations. And then we need the horn to show up, the 11th guy to show up. So we can easily debunk a lot of talk about Christ's second coming, because we need to see this happen first, and we haven't seen it happen. So Christ's coming is not, his second coming is not anytime soon, okay? In this day and age, though, who knows? So today, as we sit here, there's 195 countries in the world. And maybe I should rephrase that. I think there's 195 countries recognized by the United Nations. I think that's what it is. There's actually a couple more countries than that. But in total, in doing this quick little bit of research that I was doing, I got so sidetracked, and I'm going to take you down this sidetrack just for a second, because, it's totally irrelevant to our study. So put our study on hold for just a second. I found out there's this country, and it's a micro country, and it has 32 people in it. And anybody want to guess where it is?
In Italy.
It's in Nevada.
Oh, Nevada.
No.
Yeah, it's in Nevada. It's the Republic of Molessia. And this is so off track, but I just had to share it because it was like, huh? Anyway, it's linked to Wikipedia. It's, this guy started, he started his own country. Now, for some reason, the United Nations has not recognized this country yet, but it's in Dayton, Nevada.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah, Dayton,
It's up north by Reno.
yeah, it's like 32 acres or 30 acres or something, and 32 people. And if we go back to that picture that,
He used to call those the calls. I thought of Liechtenstein, you know, with the Rome, yeah, Pope and.
yeah, there's some other ones, but with these kids in here, it's probably down to like 28 people now, but who knows? Anyway, they got their own flag, they got the whole 9 yards. The guy,
Velocian standard time, that's interesting.
yeah, it's, anyway,
Somebody attempted that in Beaver Dam in the 90s.
did they? Didn't go though.
No, technically you can't do that. It's because they're not recognized by the United States, so it's actually illegal to be.
Well, he's been doing it for a while, so.
They
It
don't
must
get
not be a threat.
recognized as far as funding or taxes, I mean, are they completely independent?
It's all a joke. It's all tongue in cheek, and he's,
Going against the Constitution.
he pays taxes and everything, so, anyway. This guy, he pays taxes, but he calls it, if you want to take time and read the Wikipedia, he pays taxes, but he calls it a ransom or something, so, I don't know, it's all tongue in cheek, it's funny. It caught me totally off guard, and it was like, okay, we had a little time, so I thought I'd share it with you. So back to Daniel, okay. 195 nations in the world. In no other period of time have we had this many nations, okay? The last time that I was able to find that there was 10 nations in the world was back in the 1st century. So somehow we need to go from 195 back to 10 before the second coming. But we know that the return of Christ is imminent. So, and we know that's going to be the rapture. So, once that happens, we could go to 10 kingdoms pretty quick. So, I don't know. We'll see. Daniel 7 totally confirms the kingdoms in Daniel 2. Yeah, I'm here. Okay. It tells us how the 4th kingdom ends. The age of the Gentiles is there. The end of this age is marked by a major change of politics and ruling that we have never seen before. And again, that needs to happen until this 11th horn shows up. Looking back again at this slide, we can date all this. We can place the church in there where it needs to be. And pretty much the church takes up that whole, and that's what we're in the 7th period of the church right now. We're in the last days, if you will. So it's coming our way. The one question that this slide answers is how long will the church exist? So we see it starting at the beginning, and then it exists actually until the rock comes. So we know we're approaching the end of the age. This still doesn't tell us what the relationship is between the end of the church and the end of the age of the Gentiles. We're still lacking some details about all that. We need some more information. Daniel 9 gives us the timing of those events to help put the church in its proper perspective. Let me go here real quick and explain the mountain peaks of prophecy. And this is another Clarence Larkin slide. If you look at the Rocky Mountains from head on, it looks like one range of mountains, right? But if you look at them from the side, you can see that the Rockies are made up of several different ranges. So what this slide shows is if you're looking at it from head on, this is what the prophet saw. And they see those two mountains, those two mountaintops. And to them, it looks like a single range of mountains. But when you look at it from the side, we can see that there's this big gap between the mountains. It's a valley. And, excuse me, how long those last, the prophets didn't even know they existed. How long they last is a whole nother story. So this gets important as we go forward, that Hezekiah, not Ezekiel, but Daniel even, they didn't really have in their prophecies, there's this gap. So this explains the gap from their point of view. Daniel 9. All right, so here we go in Daniel 9. Daniel 9 is, well, the whole book of Daniel is pretty amazing. So a lot of prophecy that's been fulfilled. Daniel 9, I think, is one of the most amazing prophecies. And we'll get through this as far as I can, and then I may have some more information for you next week. So Daniel 9:1, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So here we are, Darius, Median descent, so we know exactly where we are. We're in the Babylonian Empire. This chapter is about 69 years. Daniel's an old man here, maybe early 80s, probably. Lived his whole life in Babylon. Well, not his whole life, but his whole adult life in Babylon. And here he's reading books of the scripture. And among those books he's reading, it's pretty certain that one is Jeremiah. So just to think about this for a minute, if Daniel's reading the Bible, we all need to read the Bible too. So if you got a prophet reading a prophet, that tells you something, right? So it's a good example for us. And as Daniel reads this, he misinterprets it. Okay? So, and we'll find out about that in a minute, but as we're going through scripture, you know, we can misinterpret it here and there, but if we do, we should be open to maybe a message or some sort of tap on the shoulder, something that, you know, maybe we need to go back and reread that. So Daniel gets his correction in a surprising way. So, so what's Daniel's reading in Jeremiah is 25:11 and 12. The whole land will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then it will be when 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, declares the Lord, for their iniquity and the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it an everlasting desolation. So remember, Nebuchadnezzar conquered. He razed the city. It was gone. Walls were gone. Temple was gone. And all the Jews were set outside the land. So God says through Jeremiah to Daniel that the desolation was to last 70 years. So Daniel's reading the books, and there's more than one. So it is thought and pretty much agreed on that he's reading Leviticus 26. And that's at the bottom. And that was a promise from God to set out Israel outside of their land if they disobeyed the land Sabbath requirement. 32 reads, I will make the land desolate so that your enemies who settle in it will be appalled over it. You, however, I will scatter among the nations and will draw out a sword after you as your land becomes desolate and your cities become waste. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbaths all the days of the desolation. While you are in your enemy's land, then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths.
It's like crop rotation, 7 years, you let that land lay fallow
Fallow land, exactly.
along the biblical lines of leaving the land.
Yeah, and it took our scientists how many years to figure that out when all they had to do was ask God. So anyway, the law from Leviticus for Israel was every 7th year they had to leave their land, go fallow. To take care of his people, in the 6th year, he always gave them a double harvest so that they could rest the 7th year. So if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, well, they forgot about that law, but probably what really happened is they're like, oh, we got double harvest, let's go ahead and farm the 7th year too, and we can even have more harvest. So anyway, God, being patient, let that happen for 490 years. So when he finally decided it was time, that means Israel owed the land a 70-year rest. So, of course, God kept his promise that we read in Leviticus 26, and he put Israel outside the land for 70 years as a penalty. And after the land had enjoyed its 70 years of rest, the people of Israel would be permitted to return. So Daniel added two together and concluded that the 70 years in Babylon was the appointed time for that penalty. And since he was in the 70th year, he thought that his people were about to be set free and allowed to return to Israel. And he was correct in that part. In a couple of years, Darius would have been replaced by Cyrus, and that was the 70th year. Then Cyrus would issue his decree allowing Israel to return to the land. Jeremiah did specify that the period for land rest was 70 years, but Daniel anticipated too much about that time frame. He thought that the 70 years was the entire length of the age of the Gentiles that was shown to him in the statute in the earlier chapter 7:2. So Daniel assumed, there's that word, assumed, that once Israel had paid its penalty in Babylon and returned to the land, the kingdom of Christ would return as well. And we know that because Daniel in verse 9:3, so I gave my attention to the Lord God to seek him by prayer and supplications with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed and said, alas, O Lord, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant and loving kindness for those who love him and keep his commandments. We have sinned, committed iniquity, acted wickedly, and rebelled, even turning aside from your commandments and ordinances. So Daniel launches, and the prayer goes on for several more verses, and it's a confessional prayer. And he's praying for himself and the entire nation of Israel, because he's expecting the age of the Gentiles to end here. He's expecting the kingdom to begin. He thinks this is it. He's like, okay, I figured this out. I need to pray for my people. Jesus is coming. We're told this again in Leviticus 26:40, and then skip to 42. But and this is Daniel again. If they confess their inequity and the inequity of their forefathers in their unfaithfulness which they committed against me, and also in their acting with hostility against me, and he goes on, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob, and I will also remember my covenant with Isaac, and my covenant with Abraham as well, and I will remember the land. So,
It's God keeping his promises.
yeah.
That's
Here, God displays the greatness of his mercy, in my opinion. Despite how cursed Israel could be, they're his people, right? I mean, they are his chosen people. And he will always remember, and there's always a remnant, no matter what. So he will always remember and receive and bless a repentant Israel. Okay? But to do that, they must confess. So when Israel does confess of violating that old covenant, they're going to receive the promised kingdom. And that kingdom promise is found in the Abrahamic covenant. This is it from Genesis. This is part of it. This is not completely all of it. This is part of it, but this is the main part. The Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. How many of you know the covenants in the Bible? I mean, it's okay if you do or don't.
I know some of them,
Yeah, I don't know them all.
yeah. Covenant with Israel, so that as long as we stay with Israel, we're gonna be blessed. If we turn our back on Israel.
Well, that's this third verse right here. So, the third verse that refers to Israel. So, I don't know. In Revelation we'll see this covenant again, and I think I'm guessing now. I think there's two others. So maybe I'll bring them in next week and maybe just hand them out to you also, just so you know. Anyway, the Abrahamic covenant is unconditional. What that means, huh?
What does it cover? I struggle with that, the Abrahamic,
Covenant?
yeah, because three religions have come out of Abraham.
Okay, let's not talk about that today, because we don't have time, but we'll get to that, okay? I know what you're thinking, so. You need to pick a way is what you need to pick. Anyway, so Daniel, okay, I'm not going to get through this, darn it. Anyway, Daniel read these words. He correctly recognized the 70 years was a penalty for ignoring the land Sabbath. But where he made his mistake, he thought that these 70 years ended the age of the Gentiles and that Jesus was coming. He had the right idea, but he messed up the timing of it all. But that didn't happen in Daniel's day, and it still hasn't happened. So here's God. Daniel's praying, right? So he gets God's attention, and God is like listening to his prayer and says, wait a minute, hold on. He's confused. Gabriel, go get him. Go straighten that guy out. He's got it all messed up. So, in the process of all this, Gabriel comes to straighten him out. Daniel 9:20. Now, while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God in behalf of the holy mountain of God, while I was still speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, whom I am seen in a vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering. That's 3 p.m. He gave me instruction and talked with me and said, "O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you insight with understanding. At the beginning of your supplications, the command was issued, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed So give heed to the message and gain understanding of the vision. Daniel 9:24 is what tells us, well, I wasn't supposed to read that yet. So Daniel 24 is what the correct understanding, I'm sorry. So Daniel 24 is the 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, end of the sin, atonement for inequity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy one. So Gabriel tells Daniel that the 70 weeks has been appointed for Daniel people, not merely 70 years. But we get into a definition of weeks, and we'll stop there because it's a quarter till and it's a good stopping point. Yeah, that's a good stopping point. So, other than Asher, any questions?
Asher, I have the two references to that. He made two Abrahamic covenants. One's conditional and the other is unconditional. And the unconditional one is Genesis 50, 9 to 2. And the second one